Okay, and then I'll ask Kathy to begin the share screen. And if you want to just go right to the next slide here, I've been able to pin a couple of our project partners up tonight, but I just wanted to remind folks, a lot of the familiar faces that you've seen now since our first forum back in February. Myself as part of the planning department, Kathy Sparrow, the conservation director with the town of Stow, Bob Wilbur with the Stow Conservation Trust. We have Mark O'Hagan from MCO and Associates, and Peter Flinker of Dodson and Flinker, and of course, Peter Brown representing Stow Acres. So myself, Kathy Sparrow, and Bob Wilbur will be given the majority of the presentation tonight, but we did want to have everybody on hand because there's a lot of complex stuff going on with this whole entire planning effort, and I want to make sure that the right people are in the room to answer any questions that come up. So we will direct any questions to the right people later on tonight. Next slide, please, Kathy. So I think what I'd like to do is just give you just some of the planning context. I know for some of you who've seen a couple of these presentations now, you may be up to speed on some of the past. And I just want to remind folks that both the February 2021 and the May 2021 meeting, which was just before May annual town meeting, both of those presentations are still up on the website. So if you feel like you want to go back and hear more of the details there, we're going to kind of go quickly over some of what we've covered in the past. So that stuff is still there for those folks who want to go more in depth. So just to give a brief recap, back in that summer of 2020, Bob Wilbur of SCT approached Kathy Sparrow and I, recognizing that there was a potential sale of Stow Acres on the horizon, and and basically came to us and said, hey, this might be a great opportunity to kind of come together and kind of step out of our silos and think about how we can think about this from a master plan perspective. Of course, as you know, reached out to Peter Brown of Stow Acres and MCO Housing Associates, who they had been in contact, and we agreed that there was enough opportunity out there for kind of to kind of go down this route and see how this collaboration could take shape. And so, of course, at the time we didn't know where we would end up, but here we are now, 3 presentations in. So if you recall, the initial vision was presented back in February 2021. That May 2021 town meeting was all about the acquisition of the South Course and the purchase of a conservation restriction there. And we'll talk about tonight how that fits into the bigger picture. And then, since that time over this summer, we reached an agreement and the framework of a deal on the acquisition of the North Course, which is something that we were talking about back in May and in February that would really help bring all of these different pieces from the residential component, from the conservation, the recreation, bring all of that together in a package that was financially feasible for both sides. So that's really what we want to talk about tonight. That kind of glues everything together. And of course, we've got town meeting just around the corner here. Kathy, yeah, go to this slide here. So, so what's at stake? Of course, we've got, Stow Acres is not only the largest golf course in town, it's the largest unprotected property at 328 acres. For a property inside of the 495 belt, so to speak, it's huge, and it's even bigger for Stow. And it's a kind of it's an iconic landscape. It's a cultural landmark. It's a historic golf course. It really, it kind of is emblematic of so much of what people think of when they think of being from Stow. And as we began this process, we knew from past planning efforts, some of our own build outs, as well as some planning that Stow Acres shared with us, that the by right development outcomes that were possible at the golf course did not really line up with the types of scenic viewscapes, the environmental resources, and some of the opportunities that that we felt could be had in a more comprehensive vision. You know, the typical subdivision plan really is more about you know, carving up a site, and you don't really have the opportunity to have those kinds of discussions. And so we also know that, of course, there's always the comprehensive permit option that is out there, and that's always available to developers. And as we got going in this process, we really learned even more about you know, how important at the landscape scale this Stow Acres property is. We'll go to the next slide, please. So I think you know, given the stakes of what we were dealing with from a planning effort, the goals of the partnership, I think, really kind of show both how the planning process really dovetails with the expected outcomes, and how the kind of the design of how we tried to approach this is really tied into some of what we I think we all hope to get out of it. So you know, the primary goals were working together on this unified vision for the property, to give everyone in town, as well as the property owner and everybody working on this, some long-term certainty in the outcome. It's something that we've never had at Stow Acres, and was a primary goal here for everybody involved. You know, having a plan in place would really avoid a kind of a piecemeal development pattern. It's really no fault of anyone other than just the way zoning and the regulatory framework works in Massachusetts, where we might be faced with a series of Chapter 61 withdrawals and never really have a comprehensive vision that really gives the town any sense of when they should act, or what is the most important withdrawal of many spread out over years. It's really kind of leaves us in a position to only react rather than have this chance to do proactive planning. So that goal is woven through this entire project. And of course, tying in a lot of our planning goals, our documented open space and recreation goals, a lot of what we'll talk about around housing diversity that you've heard now at a couple of the other forums, being able to tie those all in has been central to this whole effort. Next slide, please, Catherine. So over that fall of 2020, 2021, when we first got going, the partners worked with Dodson and Flinker, who's been, you know, a real just kind of priceless benefit to this group, being a landscape architecture expert, somebody that really understands the planning that can go into some of these larger landscape scale conservation efforts. And so really at the very outset, our real goal was to listen and share what we knew about the property, to learn from what Peter Brown at Stow Acres knew of the property, understand the different resources that were out there, whether those were environmental resources, recreation opportunities, talked about potential community impacts, and really tried to figure out what are the best places for development from an environmental standpoint, from the standpoint of the surrounding community and from the environmental resources, and kind of back our way into the beginning of a concept plan. And so that concept on the next slide here is what we presented back in February 2021. And so, you know, the key components here were the South Course conservation restriction, which is something that we voted on and approved at the May annual town meeting, and which is contingent upon a affirmative vote for the North Course acquisition, or at least the portions of it we'll talk about tonight. And that's you know, these are big numbers, 151 acres golf course. The idea of retaining golf as a recreational asset in Stow has been an important part of this, to kind of see that kind of cultural use continue, and to allow something to continue to be viable in that space. And then of course on the North Course, this kind of combination of different uses taking shape, keeping the one of the 9-hole golf courses slightly reconfigured for a period of years that we'll talk about, having some space set aside for expansion of recreation facilities, whether that's ball fields or otherwise, having a significant portion of land be dedicated to ecological restoration and conservation, and then of course the village and the residential development component itself, which is central to kind of bringing the entire project's feasibility together from a financial standpoint. So I think with that, I'm gonna hand it back over to Kathy now that we've got kind of the context back in line here, and Kathy's gonna take us through the north and south course in more detail.
Great, thanks, Jesse. So what I wanted to do is just really give an update on where we stand with the protection of the south course at Stow Acres, and then get into some of the details about the proposal for the north course. So as Jesse noted, we did approve the purchase of a conservation restriction on the 151 acres of the south course at the last town meeting in May. That is a permanent conservation restriction that would leave the property in private hands owned by Stow Acres, but would ensure that it would never be developed for housing or other uses. So what would be allowed is essentially, and I'm going to use my pointer here, within the golf course kind of core where the clubhouse is, there would be an allowance for, construction of maintenance buildings, golf related facilities and the like, obviously the parking that's there. Stow Acres is proposing to relocate the driving range from its existing location on Randall Road into the south course, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we come to the north course. Obviously they could do maintenance of the golf course, and then one of the pieces of the deal that we negotiated is that there would be a year-round recreational trail around the perimeter of the south course that would interconnect with similar trails on the north side of Randall Road. And as noted, all of that is contingent on coming to agreement on the purchase of the north course. So where we are at this point is that since town meeting, we have been working with Stow Acres on drafting the conservation restriction, defining that golf course core area where golf related structures would be permitted. And then the conservation restriction is required to be approved by the Conservation Commission, by Stow Conservation Trust as co-holder, by Stow Acres, and by the Select Board, along with the Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. So we are now working through that process. We do expect to close with Stow Acres and acquire the conservation restriction by the end of this calendar year, assuming we get a positive vote on the north course. And at the same time, we've also been working with Stow Acres to try to come to agreement on the terms of a purchase of the majority of the north course. And we did reach that agreement late this summer, which is why we're bringing you this article for October town meeting. So what I'm going to do is outline the proposed use of the property as well as the terms of the purchase agreement next. So the town and Stow Acres have reached agreement on the purchase of 115 acres of the north course that is shown here in red. The remaining 65 acres of the north course that's outlined in the white dotted line will be sold separately by Stow Acres to MCO and Associates, a local developer from Bolton. And Mark O'Hagan is here from MCO and Associates and can answer questions if we have them. The land that is proposed for purchase would be divided between the Conservation Commission and the Recreation Commission, as shown on this map, with the driving range and the adjacent wetlands placed under the custody and control of the Conservation Commission, and then the remainder of the parcel placed under the custody and control of the Recreation Commission. In drawing this line, which has been a little bit of a challenge, we have really needed to give some careful thought to the anticipated uses of the property. And we've also needed to maximize the value of the two parcels by giving them frontage. So you can see that both of these parcels have frontage on Randall Road. And this is really necessitated by the various grant programs that we will be applying to for the funding to help carry out the purchase and minimize the contribution that the town has to make. And one thing I want to stress is that even though the parcel is being divided by the town meeting vote, we do expect that there will be a master plan for the entire property that will include areas to be set aside for open space and trails, and also areas to be set aside for recreation facilities, as well as keeping those trails connections to the south course and to the proposed adjacent development. So we've heard a really lot of good ideas for the use of the property from town residents. And we want to give everybody the opportunity to weigh in on the overall vision of the property, both in the long term, in the short term and in the long term, in terms of the placement of the uses. And I know that all of us that are involved in this effort are really committed to that master planning process. So what I'm going to do is go into a little bit more detail about what is envisioned on each of the parcels. First, looking at the conservation parcel. The conservation parcel consists of the existing driving range and the adjacent wetlands that are essentially located to the west of the driving range. And the proposed agreement that we have with Stow Acres allows the driving range to continue to be used by Stow Acres for up to 5 years while they work to relocate it to the south course. I think from the town's perspective, this is a positive aspect of the purchase agreement, as it gives us time to plan for the anticipated restoration of the driving range to wetland habitat. The parking lot that is at the driving range now would likely be maintained and could continue to serve as an area for parking, both for trailhead use, as well as it would provide a nice viewing area looking out over that wetland area. And we believe that the driving range has great potential for wetland restoration. And we've already talked a little bit with folks from the State Division of Ecological Restoration about the project, and they are eager to help us. If you look at the area that is encompassed by the driving range today, outlined in red, as well as the ends of the 2 holes that you can see, in the 1960s, these same areas were shown as wetlands on topographic maps. And we believe that over time, there have been alterations to the landscape, probably before there was a Wetlands Protection Act in many cases, that have changed the hydrology of the area. But there's a lot of potential to restore that hydrology. We all know that the driving range can look very wet, and there is a beaver swamp immediately adjacent. And similar areas, this is Tidmarsh Farm in Plymouth. Up on the top left, you can see that this was a cranberry bog up until relatively recently that had been abandoned. And in a very short period of time, 3 years, there was an effort to restore those cranberry bogs to more diverse wetland habitat. And you can see kind of the resilience of nature and how that area responded within just a 3-year period. It's really quite beautiful today. Talk a little bit about the recreation parcel next. So the recreation parcel is about 90 acres. It is currently in golf course use, and portion that's kind of shown in this shading. Let's see if my pen will work on here. Nope, sorry about that. Will continue to be used for golf for a 9-hole course by Stow Acres for up to 10 years. The remaining portion of the land would be available immediately for recreational use once the town purchases the property. So that's approximately 12 to 15 acres, and is the area that's shown on here with ball fields on it. I do want to stress that that depiction of fields is really meant to be illustrative, to get some sense of what could fit within that 12 to 15 acre parcel. But there hasn't been any determination made of exactly how that area will be used in the short term. As I mentioned, we are all committed to a collaborative planning exercise that would look at the entire property and then kind of a phased build out of the recreation facilities. So some of the parcel, that 12 to 15 acres, being available for use in the short term, and then the remainder of the 90 acres being available for longer term use. Access and parking for the parcel would be from Randall Road. And as I mentioned, we'd have interconnecting trails that would connect to the conservation parcel as well as to the adjacent development parcel. And these are just a couple of pictures that show that 12 to 15 acre area in the back. It's relatively flat, a little bit of rolling area. It appears that it could be fairly easily transformed into some ball fields. And then, as I mentioned, part of the proposal is to have a walking trail network that would link the south course, the trail easement that we have there, trails through the north course, and then also trails interconnecting with the proposed development on the parcel to be separately developed. And I'm going to turn it back to Jesse to talk about the development area.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. So I think I just want to make sure that folks are pretty clear. Of course, we've been showing a lot of these maps, and we've got what I wanted to talk about right now was the part that's not part of the sale to the town, and the residential envelope on the east side of the North Forest property. So the whole kind of conceptual parcel is around 65 acres, and once we look at kind of the at least the conceptual development plan, that's really kind of comes down to 32 acres. Part of the land area for that area that's not subject to the town meeting vote is really needed for public water supply wells, given that Stow doesn't have any community public water supplies, takes up a fair amount of land. One of the benefits there, of course, is that it really kind of becomes de facto conservation land in a way, because you can't really do much else with it. So it really becomes part of the landscape. But what I wanted to do was kind of just give you a quick overview of how this residential component really helps tie this whole effort together, and some of the details on what's involved in that. Okay, so next slide here. So currently MCO and Associates is in the process of working on a P&S with Stow Acres. They're working on purchasing that portion of the property that's not subject to the town meeting vote. We've been grateful and to be working with Mark O'Hagan of MCO and Associates. As Kathy said, he's somebody who's local to the region. We've seen previous work. We know he's invested in the community. So it's been helpful to work with somebody that can really talk about the kinds of potential development outcomes that Peter Flinker of Dodson and Flinker had suggested, and what everybody kind of believed fit in with some of our town planning goals. Of course, there's the opportunity to really shape the development program, which is kind of one of the biggest benefits here, and that is to think about how the different style units, the different numbers of bedrooms and housing sizes, and all of those kinds of planning decisions, right down to the site plan itself, can really work to kind of advance some of these other goals that the town has been trying to reach for a long time, and this really helps bring it all together. Development, of course, is not part of the town meeting vote, as I had said. It is planned to be developed under a comprehensive permit, and that is really to provide the kind of design flexibility that our current residential zoning bylaw just really can't provide. And so the way that the town has thought about this is for providing some additional assurance in the outcome. The town, MCO, and Stow Acres have been working on a memorandum of understanding regarding what the limits of that development, what that development would look like, getting something put together in an agreement about how all of these concepts that we talked about in February and May will continue to take shape once we get to the permitting process. And I do want to say, in terms of the permitting, which really becomes the next step here, I think it's critical for folks to know that, regardless of kind of where you're at on the project, voting no at town meeting does not necessarily mean that a residential project at Stow Acres does not go forward. And I don't mean that in any sort of threatening way. It just means that we're kind of back to square one, and those property owners can avail themselves of all the opportunities they had back in fall 21, and they've had all along during this process. We are simply trying to work with the town to get this to a position where there's kind of more beneficial outcomes for both parties here. So I just wanted to make that clear in terms of how this really fits into that town meeting vote. So next slide, please, Kathy. So as you may recall, we had a great forum back in February that we really got into in May, we really got into the housing outcomes. And I think one thing from the planning perspective that I'm excited about is not only will the residential component meet several of critical housing needs that we have in town, but a lot of the underpinning of the design is really rooted in traditional neighborhood design, which is something that a lot of the contemporary subdivisions and the typical ways of building these days in the region, they have a hard time getting to. And sometimes it's because of the regulations that are in place, and sometimes it's just the developer themselves. But one of the clear and biggest benefits to that style development is it's really built around kind of creating comfortable boundaries between the public and the private space, really accentuating the street as a place where people can walk and be out with their kids and be in the community, and making the somewhat smaller lot sizes and these private spaces still feel comfortable in a place that is tighter than a lot of typical subdivision regulations will provide. And that really provides for a lot of the kind of benefits that we hear often about what people like about living in a place and what makes some certain places special, and the ability to bump into people and see friends and be in a neighborhood, so to speak. So it really kind of dovetails well with some of the recreational benefits, such as the public trails that have been talked about and proposed, and some of the recreation facilities and the other conservation lands. Though having those connections in place could really make this really a wonderful addition to Stow, I think. So we'll move to the next slide, which is the development concept plan. So of course, in the development itself, conceptually, it is a more walkable style neighborhood. Of course, having a tighter plan means you have a smaller footprint. I think what's always strikes me is that in this entire master planning effort that we've been talking about now for the last year and a half, the development concept really represents 10% of the total land area. And yet on that 10%, we're able to realize so many of these housing goals that have been elusive for so long and that we've been talking about in so many different ways. And so part of that is the ability to get some senior apartments, so some rentals for older adults at an affordable level, which across the region is one of the most difficult things to find anywhere, not just in Stow. To have different housing types, whether that's cottages that have more of a kind of an open space in between them, where they're centered around a green, so to speak, rather than relating to the street, all the way into these kind of cottage lots and smaller interior lots, which have alleys and streets. And we've gone into some of the specifics about the designs in previous meetings that I recommend people go back and take a look at. And then having some exterior lots too, where you have slightly larger homes, and some homes that are more design just in a slightly different design, to give kind of just a range, a diversity of housing types, a diversity of housing prices, and really try to do something that we've had trouble doing in some of our traditional regulatory and zoning projects. So you can't really see the recreational trail in this map, but I will just point out along the, at least conceptually, along the eastern edge of the lots along the eastern side of this property was the concept to have kind of the trail as a perimeter trail on this, which would really be a fantastic amenity for folks living in this area and for others coming down and into Randall Road to use the site. So just quickly, we'll go to the next slide here. I talked about some of those different designs. Mark had presented several different designs, and he even got into the floor plans and went into some good in-depth information in previous meetings. I think one of the things that stands out here is that a lot of the designs that that Mark and Peter had been talking about were really based in kind of that New England vernacular style architecture, which is really in line with a lot of what in the planning department we hear when we talk about visual preference surveys and we talk about design with the community. A lot of these designs include porches, which kind of harkens back to that idea of kind of creating these comfortable private spaces, even in this more public realm. And so really, I think Mark did a great job in some previous presentations just describing kind of how these fit into that concept plan that we just looked at. So we'll go on here, Kathy. So just to give you an overview of everything all together here on the development summary, there's the 25 apartments for folks over 62 years of age. And these are those deeply affordable apartments. So that'd be at the 50% of what the median income is in the region. And these are those units that I noted are just really hard to find because most of the time they have to be subsidized. And even in a private development, there has to be some other units that are going to be going for a higher price to make it worthwhile to have these types of units developed. So to be able to get more of that type of housing in Stow is just a huge benefit. There would be 40 rental cottages. So those would be those 2 and 3 bedroom designs, the bungalow options. And then there'd be the affordable rents in there as well. And because of the way that the comprehensive permit process works and the state agency that deals with housing and community development, those 40 rental cottages as well as the 25 apartments would count towards the town's subsidized housing inventory for folks who are familiar with that, which is really, you've probably heard us talking about our inventory of affordable housing in town and how that plays into how we're able to accept new development in town. And so having those kinds of units on the books, not only are they helpful in a very real world sense, but they're also helpful from a planning sense as well. And then last thing, of course, you have the 124 detached homes, and those are at different price ranges. You've got some homes that are in that 1,800 to 2,300 square foot range, likely more of the interior homes on some of those alleys and roadways in the middle of the development. And then you have some of the slightly larger exterior homes as well. And it's a nice plus that we're able to have a discussion about how to work in some first floor master bedrooms and some of those design amenities that can help folks age in place. I know you've probably heard me talking about that before and other projects. To have that all kind of wrapped up together in one diverse neighborhood is really something that I'm excited about. I hope others are excited about as well. So just to give you an update on where we are on the status, we're getting close. We do anticipate in the next couple of months here that we'll start to see some initial permit submittals. We're going to, of course, a comprehensive permit like this, like I discussed earlier, would go before the Zoning Board of Appeals. There would be the required public hearing, and it would be very familiar in the way that a lot of our development permitting processes go. The Conservation Commission would of course be involved. There would be some wetland resource areas and other matters to discuss during their notice of intent and public hearing process. And then of course Board of Health and DEP would be involved due to the wastewater treatment system and well permitting for the public water supply. So obviously a lot of moving parts, a lot of different notices to go up in the paper and things to keep track of. As that gets going, I know that each board does a good job of keeping up on their individual permit applications, but we will also try to have kind of our clearinghouse web page still put together, letting folks know where we are in the process once things really start getting going. Another thing that's been happening more recently is we have a new Green Advisory Committee in Stow, and I know that Mark with MCO has been exploring some of the green building and design features and just being open to kind of thinking about how some of that could be incorporated in this development as well. And of course, there's a lot of details. We talked about some of those specific details back in May around traffic, water, and some of the other impacts. And that's ongoing. There's obviously still a lot to untangle, but we've kind of begun that process of getting ahead of it to the degree that we can start to expect certain impacts or just certain topics to come up and really try to gather as much information as we can. So more to come on that as we move forward as well. And I think, so with that, I'm gonna just hand it back to Kathy and Bob Wilbur regarding some of our next steps in the actual town meeting process.
Thank you. So looking ahead to town meeting, what are we going to ask you to vote on? So the terms of the agreement that we have with Stow Acres, as I mentioned, are the purchase of 115 acres of the North Course, and the total purchase price for that is just a little over 3.5 million. We anticipate, assuming there's a positive vote, closing with Stow Acres no sooner than September of 2022. As I mentioned, Stow Acres would retain the right to use the driving range for up to 5 years, and they would have the right to have 9 holes of golf on the North Course for up to 10 years. The town would have access to the property, both for whatever uses we have for the short-term period, as well as survey, planning, design work that we might need to do there. We would also have public access, the trail access during the retained rights period. And importantly, Stow Acres would also be taking a tax deduction for the difference between the appraised value of the property and the town purchase amount. So as part of the terms of our purchase, we've pledged to work with them as they do the paperwork for that process. And here's how the costs break down. Basically, the total appraised value of what the town would be acquiring, separate from the parcel that MCO and Associates is acquiring, is $10.1 million. So that's the total appraised value of the South Course CR and the North Course. The cost to the town, as we mentioned, we've already appropriated $1.5 million for the CR on the South Course. We are asking you at town meeting to vote to approve up to $3.3535 million for the purchase of the North Course parcel. That would be covered by $2.5 million in CPA funds, which the Community Preservation Committee has voted unanimously to recommend to town meeting. And then we would be seeking grants, mostly state grants, and doing fundraising for about $1 million of the balance. The town administrator has offered to backstop up to $500,000 through borrowing that could be accommodated within the FY23 budget if necessary, but it is our hope to raise the entire $1 million from grants and from fundraising, and we think we have some good prospects for that. So at the town meeting, the warrant article is kind of broken down into a bunch of sections. We will be asking the town to vote to purchase the 115 acres for the total price plus costs. We will be asking you to expend $2.5 million in CPA funds toward that purchase price. We will be proposing the division of land between the Recreation and Conservation Commissions, as I outlined in the earlier slides. And just a note that that is required by most of the grant programs that we are going to. We will be also seeking authorization to apply for those grants and to accept any donated funds. And then finally, to enter into agreements and to grant a conservation restriction on the entire property on the North Course, as would be required by the Community Preservation Statute. Where we are at this point is that we have unanimous votes of support for the project from the Board of Selectmen as of their meeting last night, from the Community Preservation Committee, the Conservation Commission, and the Open Space Committee. The Planning Board is expected to vote at their next meeting, and the Finance Committee is meeting tomorrow night and expected to vote, and Capital Planning in the next week or so. Assuming a positive vote at town meeting, kind of here's what would come next. So we would execute a purchase and sales agreement with Stow Acres for both the South Course CR and the North Course purchase. As Jesse mentioned, permit applications for the residential housing will be submitted by MCO and Associates. We would complete the South Course CR transaction at the end of this calendar year, as I said earlier. And then we will work with Stow Acres to divide the parcel that the town is acquiring from the parcel that MCO and Associates is acquiring, and to draw that kind of internal line between the conservation parcel and the recreation parcel. We would begin the master planning for both the recreation and conservation uses on the town property, and then close with Stow Acres in the fall of 2022 on the North Course, and then convey the conservation restriction on the North Course. So there's many more things that have to happen, but those are kind of the big bullets in the sequence of events that lie on the horizon. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob.
Great. Thank you, Kathy and Jesse. So I'm Bob Wilbur with the Stow Conservation Trust. And since we have a number of people on the video conference, just remind everyone that the Stow Conservation Trust is Stow's all-volunteer land conservation trust. So it's a private, not-for-profit charity that is dedicated to protecting important places in Stow to keep our community special going forward. We work with the town and with landowners to accomplish that. And Stow Acres is a great example of that. And, you know, I was really pleased to hear Jesse, especially really crediting Peter Flinker and as well as Mark O'Hagan and Peter Brown at Stow Acres, because everyone involved has really put a lot of effort into this and has interacted with each other very openly and honestly, and it's really taken us to a really good place here. So my role here, this will be very brief, just 2 slides, is to summarize the benefits of this. And this is, you know, this is frankly what we had hoped for going into this. It's why we proposed this approach and why the trust covered half of the cost of Dodson and Flinker, sharing that cost with the town. So I will not go through all of these bullets. You'll be glad to know. I will just flag a couple of them on each slide. So the first one is one of the ones that I do want to flag. You know, this represents the comprehensive outcome for the largest unprotected property in our town. We all wondered for decades what was going to happen to this property. At some point, it was so large, if it was developed in the wrong way, could have a profoundly negative impact on the community. And if it were developed like it's being proposed here with a multi land use outcome, we're at the other end of the spectrum with tremendous benefits to the community. I'll move down to the third bullet, the permanent conservation restriction on the entire South Course. And just to remember that South Course, in addition to the resource values of it and the scenic values of it, it's also a very historic place. It has historical significance. It was the site of the Black men's US championships in the 1920s. And that's something we should all be very proud of. And to have it be preserved through a conservation restriction accommodating golf is a good way to do that. The next one is that we will have conservation and recreation use of 115 acres on the North Course. And almost all of that is really prime land for those 2 purposes. And I think, you know, for recreation in particular, we're going to have some really high quality space to be planned out and used over time to really accommodate, I think, many, if not most, of the things that we would want to do. Next slide, please. And then on this slide, the two that I'm going to talk about is the second bullet, the diverse community housing, incredibly important, both in terms of the protection that it provides by achieving the 10% threshold for affordable housing in the community overall. It gives us an immunity to hostile 40B proposals that don't generate the types of benefits that we're talking about here, and where the town has very little ability to respond, stop, or even shape significantly. And so that protection or immunity may go on for a decade or more. So that's incredibly important. But without question, the more important part is we will be getting the types of housing that we most need to keep our community economically diverse, and all of the benefits that will come with that going off into the future. Really incredibly important in my view. Last point, it achieves a better outcome at a fraction of the price. That's the best way to summarize that bullet. For $4 million in CPA funds on hand and the cooperation of the owner and the prospective developer, what we get is something that has tremendous conservation, recreation, and housing benefits for a very reasonable investment. We're all essentially leveraging each other's involvement in this collaborative outcome. So I'll leave it right there. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Bob. So on the last slide of this presentation, which we'll have back up on the website, you can see the Stow Acres master plan at stow-ma.gov email. This is the email that we've had going now for since the winter of 2021. So if there are other comments, or if you have a longer comment than you feel like you can make tonight, or another question, you can always follow up there. So Kathy, I think I'm gonna see if we can, if you want to stop the screen share there. And you can have your desktop back. Okay. So, so yeah, I mean, at this point, it's nice to see that we're still under our 8 o'clock mark, but I wanted to certainly open it up to participants that we have on the call tonight. I think there's a little over 60 of us on here tonight. If you want to raise your virtual hand there, I can get you unmuted and kind of direct your question to the hopefully the right person that can help get an answer. All right, Russell Hayden.
Hi, this is actually, well, this is Russ's wife, Jean Campbell, 118 Whitman Street. Okay. And we've lived here for over 30 years. We're pretty enthusiastic about what you all are trying to do, and impressed with what we've heard so far. What I heard this evening, though, I had just a few questions I wanted to clarify. And I'll quickly list the questions and maybe you can respond. The first is, so we're interested in particular in the planning for the residential, because we're interested in downsizing. And the map for the residential area looked interesting. It looked like you had an area for public wells, but what I didn't see was anything addressing the septic, and these are going to be relatively small lots. So I'm curious how septic gets handled. And the second question is regarding what percentage do you expect to be affordable housing, and do you have any ideas about what the pricing are going to be for market rates?
Great, thank you. Mark O'Hagan, I saw you came off of mute. I think I'll hand that one over to you.
Terrific. Yeah, the wells, as you saw, would be community water supplies that are towards the back end of the property, down towards the existing water there. The wastewater will be through a wastewater treatment facility. So we've done some preliminary testing. We haven't gotten far enough in our planning to be able to locate specifically where the leaching area will be. Kind of the town green up front is one potential area. And there's a couple of other zones, we think. With the wastewater treatment facility, what is leached out is really essentially, clean water or gray water. So the leaching area for it is much more modest in size than what you'd have in a traditional septic system. So we do think that based upon the preliminary tests that we've done and soil evaluations, that we have plenty of room to locate where that will be, but that will be part of the ongoing planning process going forward. In terms of the range for housing, we expect to have a range for pricing. We've got really three types of lots, so to speak. We've got kind of the exterior lots that are going to be a little bit larger with larger homes. We've got the interior lots with kind of a mid-size home in that kind of 18 to 2,300 square feet range. And then on the back end, we've got them, I think we even have them on the plan column as kind of cottage lots that will be even smaller, maybe, 1,600 to 18 or 2,000 square feet. So we expect to have a broad range, but hopefully, we anticipate having product anywhere from probably $500,000 to $800,000, depending on what the final sizes are. A little too early to tell right now, but given the size of the lots and what the size of the product will be, they will be, more on the modest size, modest price range as compared to, a traditional new home in Stow now that's probably, 3,200 square feet on an acre and a half at, $1 million or $1 million and change. So we anticipate to be below that for everything and well below that, for some of the smaller product that'll be available at the site.
Thank you, Mark. All right, I'm gonna go to Aaron Goldstein here.
Hi. Yeah, this is Heather, his wife. I wanted to ask about we're really concerned about the traffic and safety, particularly at Gleasondale and Cross Road. We see people flying down, going southbound from Gleasondale onto Cross Road toward the golf course often, and it's typically the same cars over and over. So we have a big concern when many more people move in that there'll be many people that just fly down the road in front of our house at Cross Street. And I'm curious what kind of studies you'll have to do to determine if it's safe to keep that road open.
Great, thank you. Good question. Heather, I think I'll take that one myself. So definitely a worthwhile question. I totally understand it's in the street network in that area is strange, quite frankly, with the different intersecting streets and the way Cross Street comes in and Boone and all the different interactions there. That area has definitely come up in different planning processes, certainly in the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan along Route 62 as being an area that we've wanted to look at. So what I will say is that two things here. There is definitely going to be a traffic study that's going to take place. The planning board has actually been in the process of updating their rules and regulations about what how to really perform a better, more substantive traffic study. Now, and I know that this project will not go before the planning board, but I will share those kind of performance standards and some of those ideas with the Zoning Board of Appeals when that time comes, and with Mark and with others involved in the development process, so that we're all clear about kind of what would be helpful data to have as we go forward. I would assume that there's going to need to be some reconfiguration of certain intersection points, and depending on kind of what the final or plans actually look like. I don't want to go out on a limb and say what those might be, but definitely well aware of that issue. And I think we have the at least the framework to get a good study done so that we can get some good answers before we get too far along in the process.
With that, will we have access to those studies and to be able to be involved in those conversations? Because I'm about ready to set up video cameras so that you guys can see how bad it is at times, especially certain times of the day when the same people drive by. I just want to make sure that they have all the information, not just the typical traffic, but also the routine traffic that we see.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, it'll definitely be every aspect of the public hearing will be documented. We'll try to get it up, like I said, on a web page, kind of as the clearinghouse. But typically, what happens once we get underway with the traffic study is the applicant will get a consultant on board who specializes in that kind of thing. We'll let folks know that it's getting underway, and that's probably when you might start seeing something like tubes going across the road, measuring traffic, all that kind of stuff. And we'll make sure that that's apparent either through the town's Facebook or on that the webpage that we keep. So I think there'll be various ways to keep abreast of what's happening. Mark, I'm not sure if there's anything you would add from your angle or if that kind of covers it. But.
No, I think that is it will be an open process as everything will be through the design. We've talked about it internally enough. I live in Bolton. I've golfed over there and I've been around there a lot more of the last year and a half. And when it's busy, it's an odd area with traffic. So there's no argument. I agree with everything that Jesse said, and certainly we'll be looking at it. And we'll have some, we'll have the experts take a look at it and give us some direction. But it certainly will be public. You'll have access to the information, and we expect we'll be able to come up with some solutions to mitigate the impact.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Heather. And I'm going to go next to Matt G.
Hi, thanks, Jesse. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Great. So my question is around what the school system has been able to input into all of this, and what the potential impact of 200 plus homes may have on the school system, specifically center school in town.
So I think I don't know if there's anybody among the partners here who can weigh in yet on exactly the status of kind of where the school administration is on their understanding of the project. I think conceptually, quite frankly, I have not spoken with anybody in the school administration. I am assuming that they're aware at this point, but obviously we've been talking conceptually and we're getting ready to get to the permitting stage, and that is where I would imagine some more interest will come out. Keep in mind, some of the units being developed are not necessarily, some of them are senior rentals. Some of them do not have the same bedroom mix that we would otherwise see in a by right development. Or most of the typical subdivisions that we see, like in the plans I showed you, I think in one of the first few slides here was of the by right development in the north and south chorus. A lot of the homes that we're seeing now when we're doing subdivisions, similar to what we've got going on down in like for Joanne Drive, for instance, or up on Penny Lane and Walcott. These are 4 to 5 bedroom homes, and that is simply not something that Mark has talked about. So definitely going to be an impact. There will be some school children, but of course, there is going to be some difference between what we may see otherwise and what this development will bring up. And I think,
I definitely feel from what I've seen from the first forum like this that I was able to attend, and there may have been many where it seemed like it was going to be under 100 residents, to now with the private bit put into it, it may be closer to 300 perhaps. And I understand that there's, some set aside for senior housing that may not necessarily have kids, but it would be really good to have something on record from the new superintendent and the principal before the town vote, if possible, to just have their opinion on it.
Yeah, and just to clarify the number of units, so there's no confusion, the total number of units proposed is 189. Of that, 25 are modest apartments for the elderly. 40 are more modest sized cottage residences, a combination of 2 and some 3 bedrooms that, with a smaller size, that there's the potential for kids, but not all that much. And the homes, as Jesse said, are focused more on a 3-bedroom design. We've got a lot of them that are going to have first floor masters, that they're not going to be age restricted per se, but they really are going to be age restricted by design in a sense. That we think, given the type of the neighborhood that we're putting together and the relationship to the golf course, my focus is going to be trying to make it very attractive to people that are looking to downsize and be in a community and have access to those types of facilities and other, the other recreational benefits that'll be there. So I'm certainly not going to say that there's not going to be any kids there. I do think that you will find it will be more limited than in a traditional development. And just more importantly, I heard you say up to 300 units, and I wanted to make sure that that people understood that it is not 300 units. It really is 189. And if you take out the rentals, you've got 125 homes, which is not insubstantial, but given the designs and the nature of the development, I do think that the number of school kids will be more limited than you'd see in a traditional single family home. But we will provide, some details based upon, national studies. And I think we've looked at that on a preliminary basis, but we certainly will provide data that we have of what the expectations are for the number of kids, and make that available for the town as a planning tool, as you're suggesting.
Just to add a sentence to Mark's response, just to remind all of us that the as of right development potential of this property was a very similar number, which would have been market driven, would have been very large homes, almost certainly many more school students involved. And the other point that I would make that I think is also valid is that the economic diversity that will be created here will be good for all of the kids' educational experience.
So Matt, all I'll say as a follow-up is I appreciate the comment. And what I'm going to do is I'll talk with our town administrator and at least make sure that there's an open line of communication between anybody at the school administration who would like to get some more information from this group, or maybe hasn't gotten everything that they want. I do want to make sure that everybody's on the same page here. So thank you.
Sounds good, Jesse. Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to go to Linda Hathaway.
Hi there, how are you?
Hi, Linda.
I have actually 3 questions. One is about the leases for the driving range and the 9-hole course. Have you come to an agreement of what those lease amounts will be? And then the second question was for the affordable units. I didn't know if any of those affordable units, Stow residents might have first choice. And my third question is the rollback taxes for the chapter lands. I believe it will only be the rollback on the portion that Mr. O'Hagan is purchasing, the housing units, that there'll be no rollback taxes on because this is all in chapter, correct? Guess that was a fourth question.
Great. All right, so we've got 3 there. I know 2 of them are not in my bailiwick, but what I will just respond to your second question regarding the affordable, or some of the residents having kind of the first choice at some of the units. DHCD does control some of the guidelines around what we call local preference, which would be offering units to folks in Stow. I know some of that guidance has been evolving over the years, so hopefully we can learn a little bit more from Mark and MCO. Maybe they have some more recent feedback from DHCD on that topic. But if there are it's possible that if we're not dealing with DHCD regulated units, that maybe there's a conversation there that can still happen. So, so Mark, I don't know if you might know a little bit more about where DHCD is on some of that.
Yeah, I mean, typically, we can request up to 70% of the home, of the affordable homes be set aside for the local community. So we will be making that request. For the for sale component, I don't see any issues with it at all. It is something that they have been consistently honoring. In the rentals, what they've been doing more often than not is that the waiting list becomes focused on local people. The initial lottery is open to everybody. But I might have a lottery firm, and we do these all over the state. And the nature of the process, the nature of the amount of information that's required, and the number of units that come available kind of all at once, or in a more kind of bungle timeframe, that we've been able to accommodate everybody. And I think that anybody that is local that wants to get one of the affordable rentals or wants to get the for sale homes, I think that they will absolutely have an opportunity to do it. Based on my experience from a development perspective and my experience from operating these lotteries across the state. So we will be requesting it, and up to 70%, and but we will need to see what the DHCD's determination will be.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. That's actually helpful for me to know too, because I haven't heard recently on how that's been going. So Linda's other question, she had two others, and one of them regarded the lease costs for the driving range. And of course, Kathy, I don't know if that's something you want to tackle.
Sure. So Linda, this town of Stow will not be leasing or licensing the golf course and driving range to Stow Acres. What they will have are retained rights for those uses. So the town will purchase subject to those retained rights. So that is part of the value that they are retaining for the short term that is helping us reach agreement on a purchase price, which is far less than appraised value, if that makes sense.
It does. My comment was, I think it sounded like it was being leased back. So I know, but I don't know whether the comment was in your presentation or just a misconception that we had. So just, that might be a question that you'll get at a meeting.
Sure. And yeah, we're happy to answer that. On the chapter question, so as of today, the parcel that Mark is going to buy from Stow Acres is no longer in chapter. And so there will be rollback taxes due for, if I can try to figure out how to say this. So the rollback taxes are it's a 5-year look back. If Mark waits a year to buy the property, he will owe 4 years of rollback taxes. If he waits 2 years, he'll owe 3 years of rollback taxes. So it's kind of from now till the purchase price, less 5. The remaining pieces are still in chapter that the town would be purchasing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Hopefully I got that right.
All right. I always try to dodge the chapter 61 questions pretty easily. All right, we got two raised hands left here, so I'm going to go to Missy Reed.
Great, thanks, Jesse. Thanks everybody for putting this all together. I have a question regarding the residential development. We are in a, I want to say, unprecedented time of real estate pricing, house movement, cost of construction. We're very much at a peak, some may say. I guess my question is, maybe to Mark, I don't know, if the economy and the market should change, does that affect, first of all, the layout or the structure of the development, the density of the development? But secondly, a lot of times when developments start out in a good economy and the economy sours, development gets half built. So you have half the houses built, and you have this random parcel of land in the back. I don't think that we as a community would want to see that. And I guess I just want to know, like, has there been thought into that? What's the rollout of the development? And is there any kind of protection that you know, I'm sorry to be negative in my forecast, but should something like that happen in a year or two out when you start the development, what do you do?
Well, I think one of the things that's attractive about the development for me, quite frankly, is the diversity of the nature of the product that's within it. In the sense that there are some rentals, there are some elderly rentals, there are products that would be, 1,800 square feet, 2,100 square feet, 2,500 square feet, and the market is going to do what the market's going to do. Right now, it's nuts. Nobody really I don't understand it, quite frankly, but it is what it is, and expenses have gone up dramatically from a building sense. The prices have gone up dramatically from a building sense, and I think I'm already starting to see that moderate a little bit, both on the expense side and the price side and the buyer interest. So, this is a sizable project. It is going to take, if things went well, it would take 3 to 4 years to build everything out, and it certainly is subject to ups and downs in the market. But what is, I think, from my perspective, comforting is that I have a range. If the market softens, then the low end of the market becomes more attractive, and I have product that can keep me going. I have rentals that can go in that will provide revenue and resources to keep things going if things get slower, to offset expenses in operating the property. So really, between that range of things and having as well, some larger, homes that will be, driving some of the economics available for when people are ready and willing to purchase will work to my advantage as well. So overall, I think it's that kind of a collection of price points and collection of properties that makes this a far less risky development than it otherwise would be. In the market, the way that just, like I said, it will go up and down. We do know that, but that's where I think there's a lot more comfort for this design and this concept than just straight up, 150, million to $1.2 million homes. That, that is a small percentage of the market, but I will be hitting, I'll be able to accommodate, 60% of the market. I'm not going to be focused on the top 10%, and that's the most important thing for me.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
Great. All right. And I've got one last hand up here from Christian Jackson.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you. My question has to do with the valuation of the land that the town would be purchasing. And I'm wondering, what method was used to determine the value? That parcel where the driving range is, it was for sale for a number of years and never sold. It's very wet land, and I'm wondering if that's taken into account, the fact that it's much of it is not really appropriate for residential development. So in my mind, the valuation should be much lower than it might otherwise be.
Great, thanks, Christian. Any one of the partners have been maybe more close to the appraisal process than others? I'm not sure who'd like to respond there.
Sure, I'd be happy to take a first shot at that anyway. So first, just to point out that the town and the trust hired Avery and Associates of West Acton, which is truly one of the highly regarded appraisal outfits in Massachusetts. No overstatement, and they're very, very thorough. And looking at the buildability of a given portion of the property is something that they are extremely thorough on. And so the driving range area was not a place where they assumed a lot of development potential. Other portions of what the town is buying had very high development potential. And And so we're very confident in the appraised values as being accurate, very accurate, and very thoroughly done. They were based on a lot of input, both plans that were done previously for Stow Acres, as well as the work of Peter Flinker and Dodson and Flinker Associates. And so both of those are referred to as land planning prior to the appraisal itself. The land planning takes that exercise of how much residential development could a given location of land support, given the constraints and road frontage and configuration and area and all the other things that are taken into it. It really makes the appraisal that much more accurate to have land planning professionals doing their work prior to the appraisal itself. Kathy, do you want to add anything to that?
I would just add, to what you said, Bob. Both Bob and I have worked with Don Avery and his staff over the years. They are very respected appraisers. And I think importantly, the appraisal was commissioned by the town, not by Stow Acres. And in theory, it doesn't matter who the client is, but I think from our perspective, it is important to have us doing an independent appraisal. So I know Stow Acres had appraisal work done as well. And obviously they were reasonably confident of the numbers that we came out with and able to reach a deal with us.
Thank you both. And then I believe Mr. Massa, if I'm getting your name right.
Jesse, you are, but I must identify myself as a non-resident of Stow. I'd like to make one comment if I could and ask one minor question.
Okay.
I must compliment all the principals involved. I could never imagine such a cooperative, positive project coming into being. I do have one question. In the center of this great plan, physical plan, there is a lot of land. I think about 3 acres. It's between the driving range and the Stow North Golf Course. It's a large, older house and a few outbuildings. It's like a thorn in a flower garden. Does the town of Stow have any plans to acquire by any means that property? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, do you want to weigh in there? I know that.
I guess I would just say, we're aware of the property. I know that both the town and Stow Acres have had conversations about it. We have no plans at present to acquire it. And I think, anything beyond that is probably a topic for a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Well, that is all the hands I see. Like I said, I just want to remind folks the presentation will be up on the website, and we still have our email address up and running, which is Stow Acres Master Plan at stow-ma.gov. If you do have some other follow-up questions, things you might want to know before town meeting, we do hope to see everybody on October 30th for town meeting. Continue the discussion, be a short, a much shorter presentation of what this warrant article means, but we appreciate the great discussion tonight, and I want to thank specifically Peter Brown of Stow Acres, Mark, Peter Flinker, and our partners for kind of continuing this effort and being here for some good Q&A. So I think with that, if there's anything else from any other partners, we can part ways for the evening and certainly be in touch, and we'll try to get any questions answered, like I said, prior to town meeting if they come up.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.